Okay, good morning, everyone. I will make a start because, as usual, I always have quite a lot to say. So welcome, thank you for being here this really lovely Houston Thursday morning. My name is Sally. I am the content director at Smart Families. I am responsible for putting a lot of the content together, and I was really inspired to do this topic because I have been just hearing a lot about friendships and loneliness. And quite honestly, I myself have been feeling so overwhelmed with my friendship groups and the group chats. And having spent the Christmas period over in England, where I'm originally from, and seeing friends and just feeling that reconnection, I just felt like this was a really relevant topic. So that's kind of, I just wanted to start with, why I've chosen this, the illusion of belonging, that connection is not closeness. And it's something that I hadn't really spent a lot of time considering until, like I say, my own experiences and just hearing a lot recently in the media about this kind of loneliness epidemic that we keep hearing about. So this is what I'm going to be sharing with you today. And for those of you who have not met me before, so this is my Smart Families role, but I also have another very important role, and that is as a mother to my own 3 children. I have a 15-year-old son, a 14-year-old son, and an 11-year-old daughter, and I certainly learn a great deal of things parenting, especially through this teenage season, which is, all the parenting skills that I thought I had are being tested to the max. But I learn a lot from my boys, and I also have been learning a lot observing their friendships and the way that, their friendships and my daughter's friendships, and how do the boy friendships look and how do the girl friendships look, and the kind of, challenges and the things that they share with me. So this has just been a really very immersive experience for me, talking about friendships. And, my hope is that at the end of this call, you'll probably evaluate your own friendships. I think a bit of self-reflection is a really great thing for us to experience. And I really hope that it will make you feel grateful and just so appreciative of the friendships that you do have in your lives as well, because those of you who are parents joining us, we often say the phrase, it takes a village. And I kind of want to dive into a little bit about, like, what is that village and why is that village important? And are our children still developing their village in the same way that we did? And how can we help support them? So this is really what we'll be looking at today. So I am so pleased to be joined by so many of my team. I can see lots of my team here today. And so they will be able to look in the chat and they'll be able to kind of monitor what's going on, because I am going to throw out a few questions and a few challenges. Thank you to those of you may have seen there was a survey attached to your RSVP. Thank you to those of you who did fill that in. I'm going to be referencing that survey throughout this presentation. I have a relatively small sample set, but I'm kind of proud of myself because that's my first little research project I've done. And one of my team, Douglas, was somebody who was able to kind of put that together. I always joke and say it takes a lot for anybody to condense what goes on inside my brain, because I feel like I go down these research rabbit holes. So I'll be referencing that, but you will be able, I'm sure one of my colleagues can put the link to that in the chat. And so even after the call, that might be something that you want to just walk through, and I will talk about that, why that is. Okay, so I really want to unpick the concept of friendship over the next kind of 55 minutes. Because when I think of friendship, I think about the people who are in my life. I don't often reflect on, how I became friends with these people. I just know they're present and they're there. But I really feel like friendship is the very outer level of something that goes much deeper. Kind of like an onion, we can peel away all these layers. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of bring some neuroscience and some biology, and I'm going to share with you the pieces that go before friendship and how we make those connections. We live in a very busy world, and like I shared at the very beginning, I challenge you to think about, where are you in your connection spaces? I have group chats. I have social media friends. Um, I am at grad school, and so I have Group Me, where all of my fellow students are connecting and talking about assignments. And quite frankly, I can have some days where I feel so unbelievably overwhelmed with the amount of connections that I have, but still have days where I can, be getting ready for bed and think, I don't know, I've had some real quality conversations today. Very peripheral. There's kind of like throwing things out, like fighting this fire, fighting this fire. Oh no, like I've got to have this ready for school tomorrow. Oh my goodness, like it's stress down day and it's just this constant connection, but I can still feel really quite lonely. Um, and friendship it's hard to define. And I've been doing a lot of research about how people do define friendships, because we do have these friends in all different spaces. So we have these friends who are just our online friends. There may be friends that people have never met in person, but consider them a friend. And when researchers try and gather research and information about loneliness, it's really hard. It can be kind of stigmatized to admit that you're feeling lonely, especially if, you look at your social media and you look in your group and you see that you have all of these connections. And so it's one of the things that researchers say, it's quite hard to get quantitative data. So it's really hard to get clear, concise numbers about how people feel lonely and the ways in which they feel lonely. So I want to start by going back to just who we are as human beings. So I have put together, as always, a little presentation. This is always to keep me on track, because if you've met me in person, I'm chatty and I like to say all the things. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I would love, please, if one of my Smart Fams people would just give me a shout in a second and let me know that you can see.
We can see it.
Thank you. Okay, let's go from the beginning. Okay, so connection is not the same as closeness. That's what I want to challenge today. So ultimately, kind of the lens I want to walk through this with, whether you are, an adult, whether this is something you share with your teen, it doesn't matter what age we are, human connection is simply not replaceable. And when we go to look at the neuroscience, and those of you who are familiar with Smart Families and those of you who maybe aren't as familiar, we have this very robust program, and we look through the lens of neuroscience. We look kind of at the science behind a lot of the concepts. But our brains and our bodies are designed for real presence. And this is undeniable. And lots of different researchers have looked into this. And this is just how we were created. We are social beings. And in fact, when we look at the things that we require for survival, whether it's, we need sleep and we need food and we need water, being connected to people is part of our survival. One of the theories that really underpins this is something called the social baseline theory. And it says that we are meant to be together. We are, these things here that you can see, I've kind of bulleted them. So human beings, we are expected, when faced with threat, to face it collectively. And, think back yourselves to maybe you've had some shocking news, or maybe something has happened. One of our instinctive things is to reach out to somebody. We'll find, reach out to either, maybe it's a family member, or like we will do that. That's where we will go to kind of seek that social support. And our emotional load is also expected to be shared. So it is inevitable that we're going to go through hard things. These things might be extremely emotional, and we will go again to our connections to go and get that emotional support that we need. Decision making is expected to be distributed. So think about our family units. There are times when we will ask people what their opinions are. We seek the knowledge and expertise of people who might be older than us, or maybe more experienced in something, to help us make these decisions. And Regulation, so being able to calm ourselves and regulate our nervous systems. We do that through proximity, so being with people and also being in relationship with those people. One of the really sweet things I was reading about, for those of you who've experienced having little children, if you ever notice sometimes like you go to the bathroom and before you know it, like a little person arrives at the bathroom and you're like, I can't get any peace in here. And as sweet and as much as we can laugh about that happening, that's actually a really, really important part of this social baseline theory, because you are a child's safe person and they want to be close to you. And so that is why they follow you to the bathroom. There are some incredible MRI studies that have been taken showing people who've been they've been taken to hospital. They have something that medically has come up and is something that is wrong with them, and they've put them in these MRI scanners, and they can see the parts of the brain that is lighting up as threat. Their bodies are perceiving there's something like scary happening, and then they ask the person's partner to come and simply hold their hand. And just that proximity, the closeness of them holding their hand, calms the person's brain down. And that is, again, just to show that our brains are hardwired to have this physical relationship and be near people. A lot of this feeds into what you may have heard about attachment theory, which is we attach and we have attachments to people, and we can have lots of different kinds of attachments. But a safe and a secure attachment, which is what we, are striving for with our children, they create this safe bond with us through us showing up and being there for them. And one of the pieces, one of my roles is I go into lots of schools and I speak to a lot of students, and I teach about the brain, and I teach them all about how social media and a lot of this very manipulative technology can kind of grasp our attention. And I have to share with you, one of the number one things that I get told from the students themselves is, okay, great, we love that you're telling us this and that that it's taking our attention, but you need to go and tell our parents this, because sometimes we're talking to them and then they pick the phones up, or I'm talking to them and they're looking at the phone and they're not. And this is, I'm going to be very bold, and this is a hard truth. Children are noticing when devices are getting in the way of that safe attachment. Every time they say something like, look at me, that is an attempt to kind of solidify and make that bond. They're saying like, I'm important, I'm important enough for you to look at me. And so it's part of this attachment, this social baseline theory. This is how we grow and develop, and our brains are constantly seeking that attachment. So then when we think about touch, and again, this is my onion, so I'm peeling it away. So we've gone kind of to the hardwiring. We've looked at, yes, we are hardwired to seek out other human beings. This is a very important need that we have for survival. But then what about the science of touch? And touch is, I believe, it's kind of the first language. Because think about that newborn baby that is born into the world. All of their senses are not online yet. So, we know that babies can't see too far in front of their faces when they're first born. They don't see color, they see in this black and white grayscale. Their hearing, everything is trying to attune. But the sense of touch and, skin to skin is often something we hear about when newborn babies are born. And that's because this is the way that we can communicate. When these little newborn babies, these bundles of joy, are feeling this skin and this warmth, it is telling their brains, like, you are safe. And we, as a society, are changing really the kind of touch that we have with other human beings. And I'm going to talk about COVID and kind of what that did to this part. But touch really teaches our body to calm down. And we have different kinds of touches depending on the kinds of people within our kind of proximity. So, think about the kind of touch that we have with our loved ones compared to maybe just an acquaintance. maybe those people on the peripheral would get more of a handshake. But then also think about the touch when a friend is hurting or your child is upset. And, we reach round and they feel that human connection. But I remember when during COVID, I was teaching in my classroom, and it was this time when, there was a lot of fear, a lot of unknown, and there was a lot of retracting of touch. And after COVID, and I went back into the classroom and students were coming back, I would see these really interesting behaviors in the classroom between the children because, if one of them touched them, they were like, oh, they touched me. And it was, everybody, we were so hyper vigilant to, germs and anything. And it was like it reassigned what touch was for people. And people were less inclined to touch each other. And we're finding now through the research is saying that that is a real shift. Like human beings are not having that same level of physical touch with other human beings. And there's a strong link that contributes to that's why people can feel incredibly lonely when they've not got this sense of touch. There's actually something called touch hunger or touch starvation. And that now is something that researchers are looking at how that void of not having that physical touch is contributing to that sense of aloneness. Like, I don't have safe people here with me because I'm not getting to experience that kind of physical touch. And let's now pivot and think about, well, where does technology fit into this? We reach for our phones when we are lonely, anxious, tired, uncomfortable, needing reassurance. And it's very easy for us to kind of deflect and rather seek out human interaction. And maybe that spending time with somebody in closeness and just getting that hug, just you're not feeling great, having a day, and you're just like, I just really need a hug. Compare that to instead being, our brains have been hardwired to reach for a phone, numb out, not spend any time wanting to connect with other humans and just simply, doom scroll is one of the things we hear. And that's really what can happen. Now, one of the things I'd love you to do is, so there's been some research about the average number of times that an adult in America has physical touch with another adult. So in the chat, I would love if you could write in the chat how many times on average per day do you think that a human being touches another human being? So I'll give you a second. And please, if you're driving, you can just be thinking about this out loud. But if you have access to a computer, how many times do you think that a human being is in physical contact with another? And then I'm going to, okay, so we have 10, 5. So these are low numbers. So I'm seeing where our brains are tracking. So thank you. I can see them still coming in. I'm going to share with you that, Olivia, I relate. Yes. So on average, a human being, an adult human being in America touches another human being 2 times, twice. Now here's the next number I want to give you. Research has also been done to see how many times do we touch our phones on average in a day. So now in the chat, would you share how many times do you think the research says that we touch our phones? Okay, I can see. Definitely we've gone on the higher numbers. Wonderful, thank you. These are, I like, you're all tracking. It's making us think about kind of where we designate our touch. So everybody lock in, because this was a shock for me when I found this. But the average American adult touches their phones on average 2,617 times. Like, is that not just really fascinating? I mean, sad, but also fascinating. When we have caring touch, it decreases cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and it increases oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone that we have in our brains. And so just think of all the missed opportunities that we have to decrease our cortisol and increase our bonding hormone, this really amazing thing that human beings have to bond to other human beings, because instead we pick up our devices. This is stealing the ability to regulate and calm ourselves. So I thought this was so fascinating. And again, one of the biggest things that I want to do with the education piece and why I do so much research is for people just to self-reflect and evaluate. And there are so many reasons why we have to pick up our phones. This is like my life. There are so many things that go on here. But what I'm trying to remind myself is that when I hear those calls for connection, when I hear my kids say, "Mum, look at this," or, "Oh, can I show you this?" Like they are moments where I'm like, okay, I need to train myself. That is them reaching for connection. And I want to put down this thing, and I don't want to, I want to go and decrease I don't want to kind of make myself feel less stressed, because half the time, what most people say is they go on their phones to de-stress, but what we can see on there can be so inflammatory and so combative, and all of these, like people with hateful, hurtful comments, that we're increasing our stress levels by looking at these things. They're actually not calming our brains or bodies at all. So I wanted to share that with you. The other thing I just wanted to end with, just an interesting piece about this touch, is there were researchers that looked to see babies in the NICU, and they were looking at, these very, very vulnerable babies who, were requiring all of this medical care. And they actually found that these babies in the NICU, the babies who experienced the most physical touch with their skin actually were discharged from the hospital considerably faster than the babies who weren't able to have that skin to skin. And they've gone on to discover that we actually have these specialized cells in our skin that actually send messages up, very specialized pathways up to our brain. It's called the C-tactile system. And so this again, the biology just shows us that this is how we were created, to be in physical contact with other human beings. Okay. So let's consider social media. And it's been quite exciting because, this was our topic that we chose for Smart Families to feature this month. And actually, a lot of similar organizations were all tracking with the same content. Because when we think about social media and the kind of friends or acquaintances or the people that we have online, that kind of presence, it really is redefining. We're redefining the way that we think about friends and friendships. And this has been really interesting for me to watch, especially as a mom, and just, looking at children and having these conversations. But we really can consider that social media is causing, especially the younger generation, to think very differently about, like, what is a friend? Traditionally, a friend is somebody that you shared your life with. But now, simply having a friend can be a follow, or maybe it's somebody you keep a streak with. I know Hillary, our executive director, she shares this great example of somebody who was going back and two with somebody on Snapchat, and they were so proud to have this streak going with this person who they actually had no connection with. It was just somebody at school who was maybe a different kind of in a different social status, and that's literally all they were doing. But these would consider this to be a connection or a friend. But digital closeness can give the illusion of making it feel real. But these friendships can be very shallow. Research shares that we can have 3 different types of friends. So we have active friendships, we have dormant friendships, and then we have this commemorative friendship. So we can have like these three strands of friendships. Now, active friends are those friends who, we're maybe seeing in person, we're having a lot of communication with. The dormant ones are the ones kind of like those long-term friends who maybe you haven't seen them for a long time, but as soon as you pick up the phone or start messaging, it's, you pick up where you left off. And then we have those commemorative friends who maybe just represent a time in your life, but you're not really having any conversation with them anymore. But what can happen with social media is it's kind of changing how these groups are operating, because now where there would have maybe been more of a natural extinction of some friendships, social media is allowing us to just continue friendships that might, have fallen into this kind of dormant or commemorative category. And the way that people do that is simply, maybe they click that button that wishes them a happy birthday, and it's somebody you've not spoken to, but now they've seen that prompt on social media, and now you get a little happy birthday, albeit they might not have typed it themselves, but the thought was there, they've clicked it, it sent this to you. And it's this way that we can keep friendships alive. Now, also, the research says that boys and girls actually also have different kinds of friendships, and that for girls and women, they really need friendships to be more in person, and that's how they determine how active their friendships are. It's the people that they spend the most time with. But the male friendships, those friendships are interesting because they are more maintained through technology or joint activities like sports. And so, like I said at the beginning, it's hard to get quantitative data on this, but they definitely realize that, girls and boys will develop and maintain friendships in many different ways. One of the things that goes back all the way back to Aristotle was, people were looking at what is friendship. And one of the things that makes friendship unique is that it's not transactional. You are just there for the relationship. It's very different to having, being in a relationship with with a partner or, family. There is some kind of obligatory need to keep that going because of that kind of relationship. But with a friendship, it's just that you are there and showing up for each other. Now, the last piece I want to share kind of on this friendship theory is that like the friendship, it is changing, but the strongest friendships are formed, and research have found that when friends communicate across different platforms, as well as seeing each other in person, they're the strongest friendships. That's called the media multiplexity theory. And that's kind of what they're seeing, is that people will have all of these friendships. Now, I just want to caveat and say that's kind of exhausting. And, sometimes I'll have friends on this platform and this platform, like the same friend on this platform and this platform, and then we're in a group chat, and then it can feel really hard to have to constantly maintain friends in all of these different places. And for the younger generation, this generation are coming up through social media, a friend isn't necessarily somebody who has that shared experience or who shares life with them anymore. It is that person who you just click that button that says, right, now we're friends. I tell a story. I remember the first time seeing Facebook for the first time. I went to university in Manchester in England, and I had really good friends who were American, and I came over to spend Christmas with them one year. And I stayed at my friend in her parents' house, and she had a computer up, and she was like, oh, look at this thing. And it was Facebook, and I'd never seen Facebook before. And it was at the time when you needed to have a college or university email address to be able to have an account. And she was going through it with me, and she was like, yeah, and then you add them as a friend. And I still now remember saying, you just click and add them as a friend. She was like, yeah. And it was so alien to me. And I kind of laugh now because it's just so normalized. That's what we do. Like, we click and add, and we can have very weak links with people, but we can consider them friends. And I'll come to the survey shortly in a couple of slides time, because the survey was really something that I was looking at to do with evaluating, like, how many of these friends do we have on these social media platforms? So this is kind of a piece that we're seeing. friendship is being redefined. Next one. So another, this is kind of a British researcher called Robin Dunbar, and he did some research to see, as human beings, how many relationships can we kind of neurologically maintain? And so he has something called Dunbar's number. So on the screen you can see this is kind of the research that he's been doing. And so he suggests through his research that a person can cope and maintain with around 5 loved ones, 15 good friends, 50 friends, and then beyond 50 they start to kind of decrease in closeness. So then 150 meaningful contacts, 500 acquaintances, and about 1,500 identifiable people. And it was Dunbar's number that was the inspiration behind me really deciding to go and create this survey, because I was thinking, gosh, where do my people fit into this? And, you know, who are these 15 good friends? And again, you know, we go through different seasons of life. We have people who, you know, serve us in different ways. And I was really interested to see where I fell in with this. And some people have opposed Dunbar's number. Some people have said, you know, maybe it depends on the kinds of friends that you have. And then technology throws all of this in a loop because, you know, like I said, with technology and, you know, adding friends, people's friendship circles, especially teenagers' friendship circles can dramatically increase very quickly. You know, you can just flick through and add. It feels very different than from, you know, creating a friendship in real life. And think about the energy that goes into creating a friendship. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But inner circles typically need to stay small. And it's not a case of do you like how many friends, and often children say, oh, I've got so many friends, like, oh, I've got so many friends. And as parents, one of the things I think it's really important that we do is that we help teach children, like, well, what is a friend and why are they a friend? Here at Smart Families, one of our norms is to prioritize family and know what our family values are. That's a great area to discuss when it comes to friendships. Neurologically, what happens in the teenage years, and there have been many studies to show this, but teenagers' brains, when they're going through this second window of opportunity and their brain is going through this rapid restructuring, what we see, and any of you with teens, and I'm going to raise my hand and say I see this firsthand, is neurologically they will align themselves more to their peers than to their parents. So they will go, and I joke and say, as a parent, I can pour into my boys and I can say I can lift them up, I can praise them and tell them all these things that I'm so proud of them for. But one person in their friendship group can make an off-the-cuff negative comment about anything to do with them, and it totally undoes everything that I've been saying to them for 15 years. It's just what we see neurologically. They assign a lot of value to what their friends think about them, you know, how they're perceived socially. They have kind of like this friendship hierarchy that happens. Now, the good news is, I'm glad to tell you all that the research then says eventually the children realign back to parents, but we see this a lot with teenagers. It's when teenagers want to spend all of their time speaking to the friends. I remember being a teenager, spending all day with my best friend at school and then coming home, picking up the landline and then spending all evening speaking to her. And my parents saying, like, what else can you have left to say to her? Like, you've literally been with her all day. But it's a very developmentally appropriate season of a child's life that they want to be with their friendship group. And so back to values, this is a great place for parents to insert themselves and remind them, you know, what are our family values? Are you seeing those values mirrored in the friends that you're choosing? You know, we want to have good, healthy friendship groups that are going to hold each other accountable and keep each other on the right path, and just be really good, supportive people. And, you know, back to the beginning when I shared this social baseline theory, are their friends the people who are going to show up for them in the hard times. We can have thousands of connections, but if you're sick and you can't make dinner one day, like, who are the people that are going to come round, with a meal for you? And they're the kinds of friends we want, and the friendships we want to be nurturing on our children, not just simply these very superficial kind of connections that can feel incredibly overwhelming. All of those friendship networks, but no real true kind of nucleus people who are going to be the ones who will love you and support you, who are going to help you with the decision making, who are the ones that are going to lighten the emotional load, all of those things at the beginning, like, they're the friendships that we really want to grow and maintain. So on that, let me move over. So the survey, I want to just spend a few minutes kind of talking about the survey and what I saw with the survey. The survey was so interesting. It was an anonymous survey, so thank you for those of you who sent back. Now, I was really looking at a few different things, and what was kind of interesting was I had a lot of people who knew me personally reach out and say, oh my goodness me, like, I'm going to go and purge all my contacts. I was like, that was not what I was trying to do. And I hope I was very clear in saying I wasn't trying to get people to go and delete anybody. But it was that self-reflection, like, just see, what does my own life look like, and what am I modeling for my children? How am I coping and dealing with all of these emotions? Am I so socially burnt out with all of these friendships, or am I demonstrating that, I am, modeling, investing in the people who are close to me? And so many people did say I got rid of people, but like I said, that wasn't my intent. But what I was looking for was to see kind of people's phone books and their contact lists, because they are archives of our lives. And, I did the same. I went through my own survey and I looked, and, there were people in my contacts who I have absolutely no idea who they are anymore. Like, I have no idea how they made it in there. Obviously, at some point they were important and I needed them, but this archive represents the people who we needed at some point in our lives, or maybe they needed us, maybe a service, a need. And I really enjoyed going through my contacts and looking and kind of reminiscing and thinking, oh yeah, and thinking, like, they're my active friends, they're my dormant friends, these are my commemorative contacts. And then I was asking people to look at the messages and say, okay, look at the messages and see how many people in the messages are you with. And what I found strongly was that group chats massively amplified the amount of people we were in contact with, because within the group chats is where we can have big groups, especially any school mom groups, or there's just a lot of people in there, and a lot of people, if you've got multiple children, that's multiple group chats, like multiple thing, like all these different cogs going. And so we have kind of that piece. And I was looking to see how many of the close show up in the messages, because that's the messages is kind of our real core where they're interacting. And then I wanted to shift that, and the next part of the survey was looking at social media. So what I ultimately learned from what my small sample set was about 82% of the people who completed my survey were aligned with Dunbar's theory of close friends, which was great to see that a lot of people were tracking exactly where he said, like, this is the number of close friends we would expect as humans to be able to maintain. What was very interesting to me was when we think about social media, to be social, often we think about we're being social with people in our lives, we have these social connections, but a high amount of people filled it in to say, after scrolling for 2 minutes on their social media, they had not even seen a single friend, somebody that they personally knew. And not only was social media showing them accounts of, like influencers or, companies that advertise things, they were influencers they weren't even following, which is a design feature of social media. It is designed to kind of preempt or like plant the seed of things it thinks you might like, which is why you get inundated with ads. But they were so surprised and reported back to me, like, I didn't even see a single friend on my social media. Like, I'm going to this place thinking I'm connecting with people I know, and I'm actually not seeing anybody I know. And then when I surveyed to see how people felt if they were to remove connections, 60% said that they would feel these negative emotions of fear of being judged, anxiety, guilt at removing friends. But ultimately, the overriding thing that they did so was that they felt like these people, the people who they removed, their views didn't align to their own. They could feel some kind of emotional stirring and just felt it was good for them not to have to be in, like viewing their things. But I also spoke to my high schoolers. I have some high school interns, and I spoke with my high schoolers, and they completed the survey as well. I wanted to get a snapshot of, okay, well, how is it for the younger generation? These are juniors and seniors. And so I had some phone calls with them and I chatted with them. But there were two things that really struck me when it came to some of their responses. So when asked about why do you manage such a large group of connections, one of the responses was, I do it because I get a sense of FOMO, so fear of missing out, an obligation to the connections I have. Now, remember a few moments ago when I talked about why friendship is so unique, because friendship it's not transactional. The definition of friendship is we're not giving each other anything. We're just there for the relationship. Different to family and different to kind of romantic partners. But I thought how interesting that they'd use the word obligation, because that's part of friendship that, historically, that wasn't something that was supposed to be part of a friendship. And then one of the other responses was about removing somebody was there was a friendship breakup in my friend group. I felt bad that I was peer pressured into unfollowing them, even though maybe she deserved it. She was a bad influence, even though they didn't do me direct harm. And this was an interesting thing that I also was reflecting on, because most of the time when people are removing friends, or it's a very personal decision, something you've seen, something, it elicits maybe some kind of value conflict in you, like you don't like the things that you're seeing or they're posting, and so you personally make the decision to do that. But I thought how interesting that maybe for high schoolers, and this is something I would love to research more, like maybe it's becoming more of a group thing, to feel peer pressured into removing somebody even though they hadn't actually done something personally to this person. Again, just the way that things are shifting, and this obligation, somebody in the survey said, it's about saving face. It's about not, you almost forgo your own feelings and emotions about it just to keep that peripheral, like superficial connection there, even though you might not really, align with what they're saying, but you do so because, and also some people shared, and then it's kind of mortifying when you have removed somebody and then they pop back up as a friend, as a friend suggestion, which you're like, oh no, now they'll know that we removed them. So there's a lot of social emotions that go around even these friends online, and kind of hiding and not wanting them to see. But so really interesting. I encourage you, if any of my Smart Families people can just put in the chat the link to the survey. It gives you some instructions and you can just go and reflect and see, okay, how many people, almost everybody who filled my survey in, I asked them to estimate how many contacts they had in their phone and then look and see how many actual contacts. And I'd say 98% of the time, I think it was way higher than what anybody thought, but it's a nice activity to flick through. So moving on. So with the friendship piece, so we've kind of looked at the physical needs of a human being, the importance of touch and why that's so pivotal in how it makes us feel close to people, and then where our friendships are. I wanted to just quickly show you that people have researched to see how people actually form relationships. So there are different stages. This is a researcher called Knapp, and he's got the relationship development model. And so there are these definitive stages. So there's the initiation, there's the experimenting, the relationship intensifies, that friendship intensifies, they become integrated into your life, and then you have this bonding. Real closeness grows slowly, and strong feelings are not the same as secure attachment. And when people are texting each other and snapping each other and with this like quick little pings, it can give the illusion of being close. But that is not how the theory says this is not how relationships really grow. Remember, we need these good relationships to help us feel safe and secure in the world. So this is a reminder that the relationships grow in stages. And here in the bottom, I've just put, we even have different neurochemicals that occur at different stages. So in the beginning of a friendship or this beginning of a relationship, we see a lot of dopamine. Like dopamine is the neurotransmitter that is kind of lighting up the brain. It's this novel, it's exciting, you know, you've met this person, it's rewarding. And that's the kind of dominant neurotransmitter we see. But then as the stages develop, we come to a place of bonding, and that is oxytocin. And that is where we develop trust, security, and we have this healthy attachment and bond to this other human being. But again, it can seem that social media
Oh, no
speeds
problem.
this,
And I'm sorry, I'm
like,
listening to a call right now. So,
social media will speed up this process and kind of give the illusion that, you know, this is all of these stages are being met, but it's not necessarily always the case. So that feeling of like, you're my person, you know, you're my person who I know is going to show up for me. You're going to, you know, be there for me during the hard times. It takes time. And again, as parents, I think that's a great conversation to have. Like, share who are your closest friends with your children and explain the process it took to being friends with them. Like, they didn't just turn up one day and then they were like in your close friends, in that, like as Dunbar said, they were right in your inner circle. Like, it takes time and investment to be able to have friends like that. And like I said, these are the friends that will continue to show up. But this is something that we see often now. People can be next to their friends and still feel lonely. They can be in a crowded room and still report feeling lonely. They can be amongst all of these other human beings and still report feeling lonely. Statistically, what we're seeing now is that this generation have fewer calls. So they just want to message each other everything. Like, having a phone call and physically talking to somebody can feel so awkward. And remember the use it or lose it principle. Like, we have to learn and we have to do these activities to grow these strong neural pathways to be good at these things. Whereas if we're not practicing speaking on the phone and having phone conversations, and all we're doing is defaulting to just like, I'm going to snap or I'm just going to send you a quick message, then we're not building that skill. And this is a really important skill for us to learn. We're seeing less driving. Teens are driving less. Dating has been shifting online. Teens will typically spend less time like dating as we remember dating. And just ultimately our life is going through a screen and we're attaching more to, you know, the screens than we are humans. So when we think about loneliness, there's been a lot of information that's been released through the media. The US Surgeon General talked about, had a few papers on loneliness as this really concerning epidemic. And being lonely can actually, be negative for our health. And in the document that US Surgeon General released, he expressed that loneliness, the negative, impact on a human, physically on a human, is similar to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And there is lots of information to say that, this is something that's researched and been proven. One of the things that I have been speaking a lot to the teenagers about is this concept of being left on red, if anybody's familiar. I believe this is the modern day version of abandonment. And these teens are very sensitive to being left on red. It makes silence visible. Like, if they can see somebody has read their message and has not chosen to immediately respond, think about instant gratification. What is social media training us to do? It's training us to respond quickly to everything. We want that reward. And when there is ambiguity in the communication between these friends, it creates anxiety loops. It's kind of this psychological piece that they are not coping well with. And repeated micro rejections, so constantly being left on red, is shaping their self-worth. Like, they are assigning all kinds of narrative to this. just this morning, I use a product called Bright Canary to help monitor devices in our home. And so Bright Canary enables me to go and scan messaging and interactions that are going on. And just this morning, I could see between my son and somebody else, one of them had said, bro, because obviously teenage boys, bro, like, you left me on red 5 times, like, I'm upset. And so my son had replied, bro, like, sorry about that. I mean, it's a thing. And so I'm all about conversation. Those of you that know me well, I'm like, we just need to talk to our kids about these things. Have that conversation. What is left on red? What does left on red mean to you? Like, what meaning are you assigning to that? And is it just the fact that, is that person possibly with somebody else? Are they, in class? Are they doing something that means they can't be immediately on their phone? It is not necessarily a form of social rejection, but something, again, it's been coming up on my radar. I've been into high schools chatting about it with the students, and they all kind of laugh about it too. Now, before I finish, I want to make sure I've got enough time. I have a video to show you. If I have time at the end, I'm going to play it. There are a few researchers who are countering this idea of loneliness and actually saying, are we actually the antisocial century? I'm just going to do my final piece. And if I have time, I'm going to come back. And if not, I'm going to share the link for you to watch because it's a really great video. But I want to make sure, oh, sorry, that was the video. I want to make sure that I'm not missing this, because the concept of AI friends is huge. And if anything keeps me up at night, I have to be very honest with you, it's what is happening with friendships and AI. Now, AI friends were apparently designed to be a solution to this loneliness epidemic. And Mark Zuckerberg, very famously and controversially, made this outrageous statement that people only have like a few friends, which a lot of people came back and said, how ridiculous of him to have made this blanket statement like that. But it's because in his brain, I'm sure he's rationalizing that an AI friend is going to solve loneliness. So these AI friends are prolific, and a recent study just came out to say that 81% of children aged between 11 and 16 are regularly using AI friends. So if this is not a conversation that has been on your radar, I would strongly encourage you to, be thinking, depending on the developmental stage, of what these AI friends are potentially doing. I often think of it as like artificial intimacy. It's one of my favorite phrases because children are learning about relationships by these friendships that they're forming with these AI chatbots. Now, I heard yesterday on a podcast, a researcher sharing that they had asked some very young children to draw what they thought was inside an Alexa, like this AI piece of technology. And interestingly, these very young children had drawn a little stick figure, which means that they are, that even these very young children were humanizing what these devices were in homes. And there are other studies to show that when people have said, how they wanted to switch off Siri or Alexa, young children have reported saying like, no, because we don't want to hurt the feelings of Alexa. So again, this is a really good place for us to have those very early conversations to dehumanize something that children are humanizing. And remember, we cannot replicate being human. So with this kind of this subset of group who are using AI friends, the research suggests that the higher use of AI friends is with youth who have weak family bonds, low social support, and unmet emotional needs. And we partner with schools, across the US, we're in the UK, we're going to Colombia. And this is why we drive our messaging about family and reconnecting family. Because it really makes me sad that children who have weak family bonds are outsourcing their relationships to these AI bots. And AI, these constant pings, AI is always there. Like they're not in school, they're not in a work meeting. And these pings, this constant availability gives children, especially, this feeling of social safety. And when silence starts to feel threatening, they will always have this AI friend to turn to. And that is exactly, remember how I said how we form secure attachments is with people that show up. And if the people is in the form of an AI friend, guess what these children are forming attachments to? It also means that face-to-face conversation starts to feel harder. If you're just communicating with this AI bot and now it's really hard, you don't want to be vulnerable and potentially mess up or say something silly to a human who might judge you. And I'm just going to stay with my AI friend. I'm going to stay over here in my little safe bubble where, this person, this AI version has been pre-programmed to always agree with me, to affirm my opinion, is always going to say and praise me for things because this is how they have been designed to be. It's very alluring for teenagers to be around these kind of AI. And also just insane that 81% of children between 11 and 16 are already using them regularly. But in my upcoming newsletter, a lot of the content today is coming up in our upcoming newsletter. I've put some really interesting research studies that, like I say, it's hard to, as this technology advances so quickly, it's hard for the researchers to keep up. But the newest research is coming out that is showing, and I've done lots of research, I've been trawling through research papers, that AI friends are actually making people lonelier. And it is for the reason that they are retracting from real human relationships and deferring to these AI chatbots. And so despite Mark Zuckerberg telling us that these things were going to be the cure for loneliness, the research is showing no, the people using them become more isolated and they are the ones that are feeling more lonely. So, it's terrifying, but it's here and we can't make it go away. And that is the power of conversation and being able to speak to our children. This is the world that they're growing up in. And it might be, I always love to challenge parents and say, it might not be that you have the technology in your home where they may get exposed to this, but whether it's they go to a friend's house or they're at a sports game and there is somebody who has a smartphone or there is somebody who has a device and then they show your child something, the best preventative way is to be the person that has the conversation first. And you kind of lay that foundation about this is not a real human. We are designed to be with real human beings. The touch piece, just a little caveat on the touch piece. Another terrifying part is the tech developers are now creating haptic suits, which are things that people wear that will mimic touch. And so somebody would essentially communicate with something that is AI and they would feel the physical sensation. So this is where we're going. And I mean, like I say, this can keep me up at night because it worries me. But I know that what I can do and what is in my control is protecting my family. And so these are the conversations that we're having. Okay, I don't think the video I have is about 5 to 7 minutes long. I'm going to just maybe share it as a link. I'm going to put it into the chat. But essentially what the video is, it is an author of a book who is challenging this concept of loneliness and instead has said that we are intentionally socially isolating ourselves because we've been so conditioned with dopamine and constantly being on our phones that actually what's happening when people are reaching out and saying, hey, do you want to go for dinner or do you want to go hang out? What we feel like, the effort that it feels like having to maybe choose your outfit, I don't really feel like I've got the emotional energy to invest in this. And so people are intentionally rejecting, turning away opportunities for human connection instead to simply go back to their phones. And there is a TikTok trend, which is where people celebrate cancelled plans. They do a little TikTok dance and they're like, yeah, my plans got cancelled, so I get to stay inside. And so it's just a really interesting other view of, are we feeling lonely, or are people being intentionally conditioned to make themselves alone because it feels too effortful to be outside now? But for anybody who's interested to see, and I want to say thank you so much. I know there's a lot of information. I will be back this evening at 7 o'clock. I'm going to run through the same presentation. Please take the survey if you would like to take the survey. Please continue having conversations with our family and our loved ones. And I guess I would love you to just walk away from the call and just spend a few minutes reflecting. Who are my close friends? How did they become my close friends? You know, and how can I model how to be, you know, have meaningful and intentional relationships to my children? So I will hover here for a few minutes and put the link in. If anybody has any questions or anything they want to talk about, any comments, I'm available for a few minutes, but I just want to say, thank you all so much. Again, this is a topic very strong on my heart. So thank you, everybody.